Here's what nobody tells you about ancient texts. The ones dismissed as mythology are usually the ones that were too specific to be comfortable. Vague spiritual allegories get published, studied, taught in universities. But when an ancient document gives you precise distances, geological landmarks, and navigational instructions to a physical location, when it reads less like a prayer and more like a field manual, it gets quietly shelved, catalogued, footnoted into obscurity, and the people who take it seriously get dismissed along with it. That's exactly what happened to tablet K.3657. It's been sitting in a museum for over a century. Most scholars classified it as a mythological text describing the underworld, filed it away, moved on. But here's the problem with that interpretation. Mythological texts don't give you coordinates. They don't specify how many days to travel, which landmark to look for at the junction of two rivers, or what precise geological phenomenon marks the correct mountain. Myths describe. This tablet navigates. There's a difference. And that difference is the entire reason this video exists. When you follow those navigational instructions, actually follow them on a map, against documented trade routes and geological surveys, you end up in one very specific place. A cave system in the Fergana Valley, sealed by Soviet authorities in 1967 after a geological team found something the official report doesn't fully describe. A place where village ceremonies conducted in a language the villagers themselves no longer understand have been analyzed and confirmed as archaic Sumerian prayers. A place where local DNA carries genetic markers that have no business being there, markers tracing directly back to ancient Mesopotamia, thousands of kilometers away. Subscribe if that's the kind of history you're here for. We cover forgotten civilizations and suppressed archaeology every week. Tablet K.3657 was excavated from Nippur, one of the most important religious and administrative centers of ancient Mesopotamia, located in what is now Iraq. It dates to approximately 2400 BCE, placing it at the height of Sumerian intellectual output. The British Museum holds the primary copy. A near-identical version sits in Istanbul. Most people who've heard of it assume it's a standard mythological text. It isn't. The Sumerians who wrote it weren't describing the afterlife. They were describing Kur. And the way they described it matters enormously. Kur was not the land of the dead in this tablet. Not a spiritual dimension, not a cosmological abstraction. It was presented as a physical location beneath the surface of the earth. A place of great waters. Permanent darkness interrupted by stones that generated their own light. And a sky that curved the wrong way, arching downward instead of upward. For generations, that last detail was read as poetry. A sky that curves downward. An obvious metaphor for the inverted nature of the underworld. Except it isn't a metaphor at all. Anyone who has stood inside a cave chamber several hundred meters high, with mineral deposits glittering across the ceiling, knows exactly what a sky that curves downward looks like. It looks like exactly that. The Sumerians weren't being poetic. They were being precise. They just didn't have the word for cave dome. The tablet provides 3 navigational landmarks, and each one, when you understand it correctly, points somewhere real. First, the mountain where the sun is swallowed. Translators read this as the sun disappearing at sunset, a poetic way of saying west. But the Sumerian root being translated as swallowed carries an alternate meaning. Enters. Goes inside. Not the sun disappearing behind a mountain. The sun entering a mountain. A cave entrance oriented so that sunlight penetrates deep into the interior at a specific time of year. A mountain that doesn't block the sun, it swallows it, pulls it inside. Second, the river that flows backward into stone. Rivers don't reverse course, except when they do. But the phrase into stone is the key. A river that doesn't just reverse but disappears. A surface river that vanishes into a cave system, swallowed by limestone into an underground network. This is called stream capture. It's a documented geological phenomenon in karst terrain. It's rare, it's geographically specific, and it narrows the search area from a continent to a corridor. Third, the most analytically precise. 7 days' journey from the land where bronze is born. Bronze requires tin. The Mesopotamian Bronze Age depended almost entirely on Central Asian tin imports because the region had almost none of its own. The ancient Bactrian zone, modern Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Western China, was the primary production center. 7 days of foot travel through mountain terrain from that zone places the tablet's destination in one specific geographical band. Overlay all 3 landmarks against the documented Bronze Age tin trading routes, routes confirmed by clay tablets from Ur, describing merchant expeditions lasting months, traveling through the lands of many mountains. And you get a single convergence point, the Fergana Valley, spanning modern Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Major bronze production center of the ancient world. Documented waypoint on the prehistoric predecessor of the Silk Road. And home to a cave system that matches every geological feature the Sumerian tablet describes. The Kani Gut Caves, known in local Tajik tradition as the Gateway Cave. The entrance sits at the base of a mountain with an angular orientation that allows direct sunlight to penetrate deep into the cave network during the summer solstice. The mountain where the sun enters. Inside, an underground river flows through the limestone, and due to pressure dynamics from a massive subterranean lake deeper in the network, that river reverses its flow direction twice per day. The river that flows backward. The cave walls are embedded with selenite crystals and fluorite deposits that luminesce in darkness, producing what early explorers described as a ceiling of cold stars beneath the earth. Permanent darkness broken by stones that generate their own light. 3 for 3. Every single landmark matches a verified, documented geological feature of a real cave system in a valley that was demonstrably part of the ancient Mesopotamian trade network. This isn't interpretation. This is cartography. A 4,000-year-old map that still works. Soviet geological teams explored portions of the Kani Gut system during the 1960s. The cave extends at least 14 kilometers in mapped sections, with acoustic surveys suggesting it continues considerably deeper. Chambers growing larger the further down you go. Some estimated at over 300 meters in height based on acoustic measurement, because no modern expedition has reached them directly. What the Soviet teams found in the upper sections was remarkable. What they found in the deeper chambers was something else. Bronze Age pottery, tool remnants, and carved into the cave walls at approximately 1,500 meters underground. Symbols that the survey team could not identify as any known local culture. They brought documentation back. Experts were consulted. The symbols were Sumerian cuneiform. Not similar to Sumerian. Not influenced by Sumerian. Actual cuneiform script in a cave in Central Asia thousands of kilometers from Mesopotamia, carved by someone who knew the writing system. The Soviet government classified the discovery and sealed the caves in 1967. Official reason: geological instability. Documents declassified in the 1990s tell a different story. The teams hadn't just found inscriptions. In the deepest accessible chambers, they found architecture. Walls of precisely cut stone blocks. Channels carved into the cave floor consistent with water management systems. And a circular stone platform of unknown purpose, surrounded entirely by Sumerian text. One geologist, in a single interview given before his death, described the final accessible chamber: a stone archway, clearly manufactured, not natural, carved with a symbol repeated at regular intervals. The Sumerian cuneiform character for Ker. And beyond the archway, the sonar equipment returned something it wasn't designed to handle. Not a chamber, not a passage, a void. A space so large the sonar couldn't find boundaries in any direction. Seismic readings sent downward returned echoes suggesting the void extended kilometers beneath the mountain in every direction. The team was pulled out. The caves were sealed. The documentation was classified. And that classification held for decades until a different kind of evidence surfaced. Evidence that couldn't be sealed. Genetics. A 2019 study published in Nature examined genetic markers across Central and East Asian populations and identified something strange in communities near the Tian Shan mountain range around 2400 BCE, the exact period of the tablet. A population shift. Not disease, not famine. The genetic diversity didn't disappear, it moved. A portion of the population left, stayed somewhere for multiple generations, and returned with altered mitochondrial DNA. Children born in a different place, from a different maternal line. Modern populations in the villages closest to the Kani-Gut system carry markers that don't match any surrounding population. Not the broader Fergana Valley, not the regional ethnic groups, specifically the villages nearest the cave. These markers most closely resemble ancient Mesopotamian DNA recovered from Sumerian burial sites. And they don't follow a trade route gradient. They concentrate at a single point: the cave entrance. One village, Kaiseljar, maintains a ceremony conducted every generation at the cave mouth during the summer solstice. Families travel into the upper chambers, leave offerings of bread, salt, and bronze objects, and recite phrases in a language none of them understand. The words have been passed down so long that meaning evaporated completely. In 2015, a linguistic anthropologist recorded these recitations and submitted them for analysis. Archaic Sumerian. Prayers to the dwellers of Ker, requesting safe passage and protection. 4,000 years of oral transmission in a community that stopped understanding what it was saying so far back that no living memory of comprehension exists. The form survived. The meaning didn't. But the content, the actual Sumerian, did. The tablet describes entry into the deepest sections of Ker as requiring purification of the blood. Scholars assumed ritual metaphor. A 2021 study on deep cave atmospheric conditions recontextualized this completely. Cave environments at depth have elevated CO2, altered oxygen ratios, sometimes elevated radon. For people traveling from near sea level Mesopotamia to cave systems at 1,000 to 3,000 meters and then descending further, altitude sickness, hypoxia, potentially fatal physiological stress. Purification of the blood wasn't spiritual preparation. It was medical screening. Only those already adapted could survive the descent. Modern Fergana Valley populations carry EGLN1 and EPAS1 variants, high-altitude oxygen processing adaptations found in Tibetan populations, in concentrations higher than surrounding regions. The people who could enter Kur and return were the people whose blood was already prepared. The Sumerians documented this by observing who came back and who didn't, without the vocabulary to explain why. In 2018, independent researchers accessed Kani Gut after Soviet-era seals degraded over 50 years. They penetrated 2.4 kilometers before hitting a blockage. Not natural collapse, placed stone, deliberate obstruction. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed only 6 meters of blockage. Beyond it, the cave continued. Without excavation equipment, they couldn't go further. But in the accessible sections, Bronze Age pottery, Sumerian cuneiform 800 meters from the entrance, and inscriptions that match the Nippur tablet, but with additional content. Warnings, passage-by-passage instructions, and references to the breath that steals life, carbon dioxide pockets, oxygen-depleted zones. An ancient safety manual, carved by people who learned through experience, possibly fatal experience, what this cave would do to you. Excavation permits remain in bureaucratic review. The cave sits sealed. And here is what we still don't know. We don't know what the Soviet teams found beyond the archway. We don't know if the sonar void is an unmapped cave system, a geological anomaly, or something without an adequate category in current science. We don't know what the circular platform was for, who built the stone archway, or why the Sumerian character for Kur was carved above it repeatedly, as if marking something, naming it, claiming it, or warning others away. The Sumerians called Kur the origin point, the place where the Anunnaki came from before they ascended. And they described beings there, not gods in the abstract sense, but presences, inhabitants, something the tablet's author encountered and documented using the only framework available, the language of the sacred, because there was no other language for it. Maybe that language was metaphor for extraordinary geology. Maybe the ancient ones were Sumerian miners whose work became legend in the communities they left behind. Maybe the void beyond the archway is simply a very large cave that old sonar equipment couldn't map. Or maybe the tablet is doing exactly what it appears to be doing, recording an encounter with something that was already ancient when the Sumerians found it. Something that had been in that mountain long enough that the mountain itself had been shaped around it. Something the Soviet team glimpsed and reported upward through channels that responded with immediate classification, permanent closure, and 50 years of silence. The permits are pending. The tablet is waiting. The cave is exactly where the Sumerians said it'd be. And beyond 6 meters of placed stone, 4 kilometers into a sealed mountain in the Fergana Valley, in chambers that haven't been entered since the 1960s, something is still there. Whether it's archaeology or something older than archaeology or something that doesn't have a name yet, the answer is underground. Behind a wall of placed stone. In the dark. Waiting the way things wait when time means something different to them than it does to you.